we at IORI really very much appreciate your time and coming tonight. We know you had some other things that could certainly be done tonight, but thank you for joining us. Had an opportunity to speak to a few of you tonight, and hopefully we'll get a chance to speak to some of you later. I've been given the auspicious talk of, hopefully it's going to advance somewhere. Oops, we're about 5 slides too far. I'm talking about alternatives to opioids in mainly post-surgical orthopedic surgery. So, to kick things off, I have obviously a professional interest in this, practicing orthopedic surgeon here in Coeur d'Alene for a long time. I prescribe a lot of narcotics, mainly for post-operative pain management, but also for post-traumatic injury pain management, chronic pain management. And I can tell you, there is really a limited number of options to that, right? We have, things like anti-inflammatory drugs, maybe Toradol, ibuprofen, Aleve, we've all heard all the names, Tylenol, Tramadol, which is another type of narcotic, but not quite as addictive as some of the opioids we're talking about. But this is a big problem, and something we're trying very hard to try and work our way around. Also got a little bit of a personal interest here. Turns out I've kind of had this lifelong love of kind of high velocity sports, adrenaline junkie and all. I can see some of you guys are also in the crowd here. And a few of my questionable decisions with regard to those sports have led to a few trips to the operating room for myself. I'm kind of like Sean. So in the end, if you can ride it, you can jump it, you can ski it, you can surf it, I'm going to try it. And if it's got a motor attached, that's better. Unfortunately, that leads to some of my other problems. So if I start from the bottom, my right foot, all my toes broken and dislocated, ride dirt bikes. That's my left ankle, dropped off a cliff skiing. That's called a peel-and fracture, and it's not good. Moving up, right knee, ACL, playing hockey, left knee, boating accident, got PCL on that side too. A little bit further, dislocated my left shoulder, that's it there. 3 or 4 times, ski racing, that's my ACL down below that. Dislocated both thumbs. I'm kind of accident prone. And, fortunately for me, all of those problems that are significant enough are able to be surgically fixed. But unfortunately for me, I was a victim of some of the side effects that everybody in the room knows about relative to opioids and their use in post-operative pain management. Nausea, constipation, vomiting, respiratory depression, altered mental status. We've all kind of heard the litany of those things. The worst of them all is urinary retention, let me tell you from personal experience. So after I had my ankle fixed, it was my first exposure to big-time narcotics, and you just don't want it, it's bad. So because of my experience with that, I've learned that over the years, I need to, when I have something done surgically or just have something that's really painful, to take care of it, I have to rely on something other than narcotics. So that's where we go into this talk. So the opioid crisis in the United States. Really we're talking about, when everyone's talking about the opioid crisis, they're talking about prescription narcotic crisis, but really it's a bigger problem than that. So these graphs are a little tough to get to, but the punchline is all the way on the right side. In the end, the big number for prescription narcotic deaths in 2017 in the United States, which is the last year we have good data for, is 17,000 plus. 17,000 people OD'd on prescription narcotics in this country in 2017. The number for overall opioid deaths in this country, more than 47,000. That's a huge number. And 30,000 of those are not prescription medication related. So we'll get to why that's an issue, but it clearly is. As far as the prescription medication side of things, the reason we have a big problem is that 95% of all hydrocodone and oxycodone prescriptions prescribed worldwide are consumed in the United States. So we clearly have some different ideas about what needs big-time pain medication and what doesn't. because they don't really use them so much in other countries. We just lost the slide. So prescription drugs like oxycodone and hydrocodone, Dilaudid, not so much fentanyl anymore, but all of those are pretty readily available. You can get your physician can prescribe them for you. If people get them from their family members. You can buy most of these things on the corner in downtown Coeur d'Alene if you want. And this is a big problem. There's also a big smuggling problem. We're getting a lot of fentanyl and Dilaudid being smuggled in from Mexico right now. But in the end, the big problem is that all of them are horrifically addicting. And some people are a little bit more prone to addiction than others, but in the end, if you take these drugs, sooner or later, you're going to be physically addicted to them, in addition to psychologically addicted, which means withdrawal if you stop taking them, which means a big problem. So the other side of the equation that is kind of pushed under the rug when most of us in the news, reading the news about the opioid crisis is where the addictive behavior and the addiction to prescription narcotics comes from. So, leads to rather. And that is recreation drugs. And the big hitter in this neighborhood is heroin, which is becoming very much more common. In Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, this is a problem. You wouldn't think Coeur d'Alene's drug capital of the world. But in the end, there's a dramatic use nationwide over the last decade, and it's becoming a big problem here in our local communities. The big problem with things like heroin, which nobody in this room probably has any exposure to, is that the strength of it is really unpredictable. Depending on where it's manufactured, who manufactured it, it could be 100-fold difference in the potency of it. Thus, how do we get 30,000 people dying from using heroin? It's because when you start taking a drug and it's 100 times more potent than you thought it was, and it's a respiratory depressant, a lot of people are going to end up in pine boxes. It's just the way it is. So this is a big problem in addition to the prescription side of things, and needs to be addressed clearly. The societal cost, in addition to these lives that are lost, which is an obvious tragedy, the societal cost monetarily is massive. We're talking about $80 billion annually are put out to try and cure this problem. So it's a big deal. So now we get to the point of the talk, which is what are some alternatives? And obviously I don't have time tonight to address all of those alternatives. I actually heard a couple I'll mention at the end about tonight. But acupuncture, TENS units, supplements, marijuana, CBD, all of these things, we'll kind of go through what options are out there. So first is acupuncture. Pretty cool. So acupuncture's been around 3,500 years. Obviously, Far East Asia seems to where it come from, but in the 1970s really became popular here in the United States. And the idea, if I can state this correctly, is they use needles to try and interrupt the flow of your chi or energy through these meridians in your body. I don't have any idea how that works, but I can tell you it does work. From personal experience, back in the day, obviously quite a while ago now, I was doing some of this Ironman stuff, got a really bad problem with my back. And 6 weeks before the event, things are going down the toilet. You've been training for 6 months, and I can't even walk a mile. And believe me, treated myself, physician treated myself, tried the anti-inflammatories, tried the steroids, tried chiropractic manipulation, tried massage. I tried everything. And in the end, managed to find my way into an acupuncturist's office. I went and saw him 4 or 5 times, and you could say, gee, maybe something else was going to get better anyway. The last time I'm there, I'm literally sitting on the side of this guy's table. He's got me, and it's surreal. It's like you're kind of in this, you think it's maybe somebody's got a camera on you. Because he's got needles in your forehead, and the top of your head, and he's got them stuck in your back with a little piece of incest on there, and he's lighting them on fire. It was not something I was really up for, but in the end, he twists a couple needles. I go from feeling it to not feeling it while I'm sitting there wide awake. Haven't had it since. It's been 10 or 12 years. So it works. The NIH has studied it. National Institutes for Health have studied it, and they found that it also can show pretty consistent relief in chronic pain. The VA, they obviously believe in it because they put out the money to train 2,800 field medics in battlefield acupuncture, which is the treatment of battlefield wound pain with acupuncture. So it works. It also works in some animal studies, which we don't need to Next is kind of electrical stimulation. There's two different kinds. One's TENS units, which are transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulators, relatively inexpensive. The idea is you put a patch on one part, patch on another, send an electrical signal through, and it theoretically stimulates some of these internal neuromodulators that we have, opioid receptors and muscarinic receptors, serotonin receptors. And in the end, those are what our body naturally uses to modulate transmission of pain signals. So that's how it seems to work. The percutaneous ones work reasonably well. The implantable ones, spinal nerve stimulators for the spine, work really pretty well. Unfortunately, they're very expensive, but as time goes on, those are going to become more common. The only problem seems to be with these that it's kind of intensity driven, and you can only turn the volume up so high, and it's duration dependent. So over time, there seems to be an upregulation of the number of neuromodulator receptors that you have, so it doesn't work as well. I don't know who in this room is not taking some sort of supplement. Because, and you can read the list, it's a massive list. And I can tell you from personal experience in my profession, almost everybody that comes to the operating room is on all these supplements of one form or another. And they scare the crap out of me. Because I don't really know the mechanism by which they work. And I don't really know how those interact with all the anesthetic agents that we're going to give you, and the postoperative pain medications we're going to give you, and all these other things. They're incredibly popular today, but they're a little nerve-wracking because we really don't know how they work. They haven't been studied very well because they're not controlled by the FDA, and nobody wants to put out the money to study them. Here's the big hitter. That's the Time magazine article not too long ago. So cannabis is, what everybody certainly in this room, being so close to Washington, has heard about. It's been around for 4,000 years. It's essentially used all around the world. It was very popular in the United States of America, actually, prescribed regularly by U.S. physicians up until the early 1900s. It was a picture of a marijuana plant was on the U.S. $10 bill until 1900. George Washington, 1/3 of all the crops that he grew were hemp. I mean, this is something that was involved in the foundation of the United States. Hemp was a major crop in the early foundation of the United States, exported to Europe wholesale, like in a huge volume. Now, obviously, there's a stigma attached. Now it's no longer kind of good, went through the 70s, got a little worse. It was federally first regulated in 1937. The Marijuana Tax Act put a tax on it, so it was too expensive for most people. But interestingly, not until 1970 was it controlled substance in the United States. And that was a Controlled Substance Act, and that made it a grade 1 drug, a federal class 1 drug, which makes it the same as heroin, makes it the same as cocaine, makes it the same as methamphetamine. And if you have 3 ounces or more on your person, you're going to prison for 5 years and paying a $10,000 fine, other than in any of the states where it's not been legalized. It's still a federal crime. So cannabis, there's essentially a big branching point. Main branches down here. One goes to hemp, the other goes to cannabis. Cannabis divides into 2 kind of sides, which is indica and sativa. They're thought to have a little bit different actions, relaxing versus invigorating. And if you go over to one of the marijuana sales places in Washington now, they will give you a long list of all these different types of THC-containing marijuana that have all these different actions. And the list is really pretty complex. It's almost hard to follow. But in the end, from a medical standpoint, we know, it's been very clearly shown, that THC-containing marijuana is known to help glaucoma. It's known to be a good muscle relaxant. It's known to treat many seizure disorders. It's known to be a very potent anti-inflammatory agent treating irritable bowel syndrome. And it makes you hungry, right? So it's a worthwhile thing. The other side of the equation is CBD. So CBD is cannabidiol. THC is tetrahydrocannabidiol. So CBD is maybe, and anybody who hasn't had their head in the sand in this room probably recognizes it's been used, it's been getting more and more popular. You see it everywhere. It's from mainly the hemp plant, which is the other branch of the tree. So there's a very low level of THC in it, which is the mind-altering side of things. It's been demonstrated very clearly to treat certain types of pediatric epilepsy. There's a drug, FDA-approved drug called Epidiolex, which is used to treat that. That's legal in this state. 30 states in the country, CBD is 100% legal. All of the states in this country, it's federally controlled. So even in Washington, theoretically, there's a federal control over the sale of CBD and THC. They're just kind of ignoring it. The Farm Bill of 2018 made it so that anybody federally would be okay to buy CBD with 0.3%, that's the magic number, of THC in it. And that's important because it comes from hemp. Hemp is related to cannabis. And when you try and squeeze a hemp plant and get out the oil, there's going to be some THC in it. So in order to get THC with cannabis with no, CBD with no THC in it, you have to do some refining. And that's a lot more expensive. And that makes it a lot more difficult. So the bottom line is, it's really difficult to get a really reasonable supply of CBD with really low THC in it. It's still illegal in Idaho. In Idaho, the level of THC that's allowed in CBD oil is 0.0. So, oh, and by the way, even at 0.0, it has to come from a certain part of the hemp plant, namely the stem or non-germinated seeds. I'm not sure why that matters, but there you have it. I mean, we're dealing with these minutiae details in our state legislature that are meaningless. But there you have it. Moving on with CBD, it's an interesting product. We know that it seems to help in some studies, small studies, with chronic and acute pain relief, neuropathic pain like from diabetes. It's got a great muscle relaxing effect. Seems to work better if you take a little THC with it. Yeah, but not so many people want to be exposed to that. It may have some minor side effects, but most of those are not felt to be significant. You can have nausea, some somnolence. You can have a little rash from the oil and things like that. The big problem with CBD is there's really no control on production. So in last year, they did a study and studied 43% of all CBD products across the board, and they studied all of them, excuse me, and 43% of the ones they tested had some amount of THC other than what was on the label. So most of them were over the limit and probably illegal to purchase. Some states are still very strict about that. Idaho in particular, Washington, most of the other states in the Northwest not so much. Interestingly, hops and flaxseed are turning out to be a source of potential large volume CBDs. So in the end, to wrap things up, we clearly need some other options. We've got this big, vast number of narcotics and things like that, but we don't have any real options. We need some innovative concepts. We need some people to come up with great ideas to explore for alternatives to pain management with narcotics. We need some better funding for the research. NIH needs to step up to the plate. We need to hopefully eliminate some of this superfluous regulation that's out there. I don't know that anybody really believes CBD oil is going to be the downfall of our society. Why is it so tightly regulated, in particular in a state like Idaho? And hopefully, if we work on it long enough, we'll find an answer to some of these difficult questions.